Tov. And that will be my last words in Hebrew until I say Todah Rabbah. I will try to speak slowly, and for those of you who remember the times of records and albums, this is a 33 record on 78 speed. So I'm going to slow down my English, and I know slow down. I know almost all of you speak English certainly better than my Hebrew, but I was delighted to be back here. It was 2002. The conference, I think, it was 30 years of social activism. And I would like to take the 10 minutes or so, and Ronnie will give me a signal when I have a few minutes left. But I wanted to set, in the context of talking about building alliances and networks and coalitions of people who have like interests but are not identical, I did want to set the global scene. Because it was August of 2001 when I, as president of the United States National Association of Social Workers, we call it NASW, I was at the International Federation of Social Workers conference representing the U.S. in Singapore. And by the way, that's the first time I met is the Israeli delegation of folks who were representing your country in this international arena. And why am I starting with that? Because we are talking about a global context. Jim from Canada, Darlene and I here from the U.S., we want to talk about what we have in common to build bonds across countries with the same or similar progressive agenda for social and economic justice. But in that conference, at that IFSW, we had to make an incredibly hard decision, and that was to cancel the conference, the IFSW conference the following year that was to be in Zimbabwe, on the first time in the continent of Africa. And why did we cancel it? We canceled it because they had no money, and they came to appeal to us, the wonderful social workers, not to cancel it. But we didn't have money for translation, and the whole South America continent didn't speak English, and they wanted to have the translation in Spanish. The very ideologically left European social workers did not want to come to a country that had a dictator as president of that country, and they would boycott. So we had to cancel it because nobody would come. And then 3 months later, 1 month later, 9/11. And guess what? Nobody was coming to America. And in the middle of that, and then it was the middle of what I understand, the second intifada going on here, with bombs going off every week that we heard. At least that's the way it seemed. And nobody was coming here. When a world is that divided and isolated, you never could build coalitions for social change. I got an invitation from somebody named Ronnie Kaufman. It was the beginning of emails, and for me, the use of emails. And I said, oh, she's wonderful that she's inviting me to come. And no, everybody, my family would disown me if I went. Everything they were hearing in the world. And I used my heart, my instincts, and one person to say, of course you should go. And that was the beginning of my window of the world and awakening to Israel and all that you have given me over these years. And Abner was the reason. And the day before I came, I jumped up on my couch when this Ronnie Kaufman invited me to stay with him and his wife. And I said, Ronnie's a man. Oh my God. And Ronnie invited me because we did a lot of research and we wrote a lot about coalition building. So it seems very fit. But the idea, and I sort of this theme of what I was going to say today in the context of the few minutes, not to give a lecture on the theory of coalition building, but to talk about the need to be at the table, the need to be with folks who may even be adversaries, and how difficult today it is to get us to the table, to even begin the dialogue. So okay, all right? And in order to get to the table, sometimes you have to be at the door, kind of banging to get you in and to be able to make those, to have a dialogue. And I had the privilege back then of being invited to the home of a sheikh in the Bedouin village in the south, in the Negev. And I was given permission by a wonderful man named Kir Albaz, who said, yes, you can ask him anything. So this was everything you wanted to know about, but were afraid to ask. And he was getting up that whole day to mediate with people and to talk to people who were coming to see him as the wise man in the village. And what did he say? And I said, Sheikh, translating from English to Hebrew to Arabic, is there any problem that you wouldn't take? You know, because small minority communities in countries like to solve the problems in their own communities first, culturally sensitive to their own communities. And he said, no, I have one condition for anything that I do, and that's that the two parties come together. And isn't that a wonderful comment, that he will talk to everything and talk to everybody, and he feels that you can solve anything if people are face to face. So we know that extremist groups do not coalesce. Extremist groups want to keep people apart. They don't want people dialogue, because it's very hard to have that hard line that this is my enemy and I can't talk to you. And I feel like that's a metaphor for what coalitions are. We bring groups together that are separate and stay separate, but come together for a common agenda. That common agenda is this, and a couple of last lessons about that. One is that negotiation and compromise are not dirty words, that you're not going to get everything. So you have to decide, when do you resist? We're going to go to the mat. We are going to fight. We're not going to give in on this point. When do you capitulate? When do you say, we give up? We can't control that. That's gone. And when do you come to the center to negotiate and compromise? And that's what organizers do, is to know when to do what. When to resist, when to capitulate, and when to negotiate and compromise. And that is the beauty of coalition building. And I leave you with what we call in English the metaphor of a kaleidoscope. So all of you know what a kaleidoscope is, right? That telescope. At the end it has those pretty colors, those lenses. And what happens if you shift the kaleidoscope 1 millimeter? What happens? What do you get? Incremental change? No. You get transformative change. A whole new pattern and a way of looking at the world. So when you come together, it's not about little pieces. It's what I heard from Jim about Avner. Visionary. You get a whole new way of thinking about things if you do one thing different. So I leave you and myself is to think about some person that you never could talk to, the uncle who you ruin your dinners with, your Shabbat dinners when he comes because you're always fighting, is to be able to ask the question, so why do you think that way? How can we come together? What do we share in common? Which is the beginning of the way to change the world.
תודה רבה לטרי.